According to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Database, more than 600,000 Americans of all ages go missing every year, and approximately 4,400 unidentified bodies are recovered every year. The following case is just one of those disappearances. Marvin Alvin Clark was born in Iowa in 1852, and throughout his life had several different jobs. At one point he was a farmer, as well as a town marshal in Nebraska and Oregon. By 1926, Marvin had married a woman called Mary and settled in Tigard, Oregon, about 10 miles south of Portland. The couple and their 4 children lived there for about 15 years, where he was well known. On October the 30th, 1926, Clark departed his home in Tigard, Oregon, around 1 p.m. to meet his daughter, Mrs. Sidney McDougall, who was resident and manager of the Hereford Hotel at 735 Hoyt Street in northwest Portland, but he never arrived at the hotel. However, his daughter had no idea that he was coming. When the family and authorities realised that Marvin Clark was missing, they immediately started a search for him, where police in all northwest cities were asked to look out for him. When Clark initially went missing, people claimed to have seen him at a bus terminal in Yamhill Street, Portland, dressed in a dark suit and wearing a hat. If Marvin was dressed in only a suit, it appears that he was not wearing suitable attire, as it is extremely cold in Oregon in late October, which could add to the fact that he was not in a healthy mental state. Initially, his family was afraid he'd been hurt or killed by someone. It is possible that he could have made enemies during the time he was a marshal. Was he in a fragile mental state when he left the house, and could his vulnerability have led someone to take advantage of his fragile condition? A newspaper called the Morning Oregonian purported that Clark had arrived in Portland on Saturday, November the 6th by stagecoach. However, a conflicting report published that he'd arrived by bus. Then on Tuesday the 9th of November, his son Grover received a postcard from him 271 miles away in Bellingham, Washington. Whatever was in the postcard led Grover and his wife to believe that Marvin was not in a healthy state of mind, as the writing appeared to be jumbled. Witnesses also claimed to have seen Clark in Bellingham between November the 2nd and November the 3rd. According to newspaper reports, Clark had a paralysed right arm and walked with a limp, a description that police hoped would help with witnesses. On November the 11th, his daughter posted a $100 reward that could help with information that might lead to his whereabouts. Unfortunately, Marvin Clark was never found dead or alive, and he appears to have vanished into thin air. It had been 60 years since Marvin Clark had disappeared, when on May the 10th, 1986, loggers discovered a complete human skeleton in a wooded area near Scappoose, Oregon, about 20 miles north of Portland. There was no identification, and authorities estimated that the remains were that of a person between 35 and 55 years of age at the time of death. The only evidence close to the body was several artifacts from the late 19th and early 20th century, which were an 1888 Liberal head nickel, a 1919 penny, a pocket watch, leather shoes, and a Fraternal Order of Eagles pocket knife. The Fraternal Order of Eagles is an international non-profit organisation founded in 1888 in Washington state. And 4 tokens with the inscription D and P, a pair of wide-rimmed glasses, and a .38 revolver and a spent shell. Even though the bones were possibly that of a younger person, police suspected the remains could be that of Marvin Clark. The state medical examiner, Dr. Karen Gunson, found a bullet hole in the man's skull and ruled the death as a suicide. A few days after the discovery of the body, Clark's granddaughter, Dorothy Willoughby, came forward, suspecting the remains may be that of her missing grandfather. But unfortunately, positive identification could not be made at the time, as DNA technology was not available. Dorothy Willoughby died in 1991. In 2004, Dr. Nikki Vance was a forensic anthropologist at the Oregon State Medical Examiners and began looking through the office's unidentified remains. In 2011, she came across the files for Marvin Clark and the John Doe from the National Park in Oregon in 1986. With the introduction of DNA testing in the late 1980s, Dr. Vance was able to check whether Marvin Clark and the John Doe were the same person. Dr. Vance then sent a DNA profile from the John Doe to the Center for Human Identification at the University of North Texas and was able to get a full DNA profile from his remains. Investigators then worked to get DNA from a relative of Marvin Clark. To acquire this, they went through genealogy databases and luckily found some of his relatives from his paternal side who were able to provide DNA. They then had to get DNA from his maternal side to enable them to get as full a profile as possible. But the medical examiners were unable to locate maternal descendants of Clark in order to make a positive identification. With the information that was available about 6 months later, they found that the remains were confirmed to not be those of Marvin Clark. However, in 2018, Coin TV reported that Pam Knowles, a great-great-granddaughter of Clark, meant that they were finally able to provide DNA samples from the maternal side of the family, which they were unable to get in 2011. The DNA samples were sent to the University of North Texas for comparison, whereupon it was determined that the remains were definitely not those of Clark. As of 2018, the identity of John Doe's remains is unknown. A Multnomah County police officer in Oregon by the name of Ryan Huckler stated that if at any point in the future bones are sent in and it's Marvin, we will get a positive identification. And who's to say you won't get found by a hunter, or a landscaper, or a developer, or a hiker that could come upon his body by chance? So there's a possibility that his remains could still be found. Marvin Clark has been missing for almost 100 years, which could make his disappearance the oldest active missing person case in the United States.